is how can we shift healthcare, delivery of health when it comes to young people from sort of the reactive treatment to continuous understanding or monitoring, from sort of hospital based support to community first ecosystem. And that's why we think we need to do something about this. So I am one of the co-founders of Heyr. So we started this project about 3.5 years ago. But before that, now I'm from Hong Kong, grew up there for 17 years, then moved to London, and I discovered drum and bass and jungle.
Okay. Welcome to the
And I
UK,
was
drum and
like,
bass and jungle, yeah.
You guys have no idea how lucky, growing up
Yeah.
in London. So much taste and cultures and sound. Anyways, then I come to realize people here are so much more open,
Oh, wow, okay.
talking about stuff, right? And growing up in Hong Kong, in my household, like emotional well-being, that conversation never happens, right? The fact that my mom never say, I love you, like, for us, it's always a little bit cringe, expressing ourselves, going deep, even among friends and peers and colleagues. So then, after I graduated, I had a background in biomedical science. At that time, I was like, I'm gonna apply for consulting, all these like big companies. Didn't get anything. And I thought, am I that bad? And then I started, looking at other alternatives. Like, then I look at startups. Obviously, with my background, going into healthcare, digital health, it's an obvious choice. Then I start applying for different companies, like 10 people companies, 20 people companies, 120 people companies. And I'm getting a lot of response. And I was like, okay, this is interesting.
And
For
what was
me,
the timeline for that? Just to give some context around the timeline, because
yeah.
looking for roles, like the job market has changed over the last 15 years when, 20 years when I was kind of like my entry point into like getting my career like going to like, what year was you kind of like looking for roles in the UK?
So it was after I graduated.
And when was that?
That was back in 2017.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
That was probably
that was
around
a long time
just
ago.
just slightly before the period. Yeah, I'd probably say things got a lot more difficult probably right post pandemic in terms of looking for roles and stuff like that. You glossed over your Hong Kong kind of like background. I'm interested and intrigued to kind of like what was your upbringing like in terms of. I know you mentioned that kind of like emotional communication was in there. And it's kind of like similar to kind of like a lot of African cultures as well. We kind of like express, or parents express their emotions in different way. It wasn't kind of like as verbal, like speaking about love and kind of, being outwards and saying those kind of things. Not all African cultures, but some. And it's conversations that we have as well. Like we express, love through making food or kind of,
Exactly.
like family events and kind of like, like warm events that we kind of like have. Speak more about your growth in Hong Kong, kind of like what you were exposed to, different cultures, maybe education and all the things.
Yeah, I mean, I came from a very sort of traditional sort of household. I was very fortunate, went to some of the really good schools in Hong Kong. But again, like when you are sort of doing well in that environment, like I didn't realize I was living in a bubble, right? The fact that there's so much access to information and vibe on the internet, and I was missing out a lot without realizing. And in hindsight, I think it was a good sort of way for me personally growing up in that environment. But again, when it comes to living life fully, you have to go out there and embarrass yourself, you know? So
So you felt like you was pretty restricted over there. You didn't feel like you was fully. But when you was in Hong Kong, was you kind of like looking at the things that were going on in the UK or kind of like going on in the US or like other areas of the world? And like, how did you come to the decision? Why the UK as well?
It was my mum's decision, so I'm not gonna sugarcoat that. Um, but as I said earlier, like, ever since moving here, like, we can learn so much from different industries. Yes, I'm right now operating in the digital healthcare industry, but I've been talking to people in fashion and sports, like marketing, like content creators. Like, people are bringing so much onto the table. And for me, what I've learned since I started this company is to judge less, is to be more open minded, is to listen deeply to other perspectives of things. Yeah.
So that okay. So that, thanks for giving us a bit of background in terms of kind of like how you thought about when you was in Hong Kong, and obviously you've been open to kind of like spread your wings, right? Since you've
Yeah.
kind of like been traveling and stuff like that. In terms of your job search, like mentioned like some of your career background, I saw that you've obviously been involved with One Young World and kind of like found Vine, and I did do a quick check for your LinkedIn and stuff like that. Explain that journey from kind of like graduating, looking for roles, and kind of like what experience that you've got up until this point before
Yeah.
founding Heyr.
I mean, my first job working for a 5 people company in the UK is life changing.
What were you
right?
doing?
I was the so-called operational analyst at that time. But when you're the most junior person in the room, it's a curse, but also a blessing, right? You get to try everything. So my role 7, 8 years ago at that company was basically every morning I go see my ex-boss, ex-founder, and ask her one question: how can I help you? And that's it. And I was trying different things from marketing, going to investors meeting, like asking people for money. It's scary at first, but also talking to customers, talking to users, right? I think sometimes on the internet, a lot of these podcasts, they glamorized, is that a term?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
entrepreneurship,
exactly. Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's like they're selling you this like amazing life, like you can do your own thing, it's flexible. But sometimes we have to get the basics right. You know? I don't care which university you go to, how many degrees you have. But when it comes to starting a company, you have to listen deeply. You have to empathize with your customers, to your users. Listen to what they say and what they did not say. And for me, these are the skills, the soft skills per se, which I think it's super important that you can't just learn from a textbook or a YouTube channel.
100%. That experience that you gained just after graduating was like you was straight into the deep end, working for a startup.
Yes.
And that is just, it's a pretty much a mini MBA, like kind of probably what you did, and kind of like that exposure you mentioned to all the different areas that you worked in. What happened after that company? Was that company successful? Did it kind of like what happened there, and kind of like what did you move on to doing?
I mean, first and foremost, I'm super grateful for that kind of the environment and experience that I had. As you said, it was a very intensive MBA. So I got promoted 3 months later, becoming the manager. Again, I've not managed any teams before. Everything I do is the first time. Like running a social media campaign or creating a pitch deck for like 10 investors in the same room. Like these things, like how on earth I know how to do it, right? But for the fact that I'm sort of like on the trenches, like, like fighting the chaos, embracing the chaos. And I come to realize nobody's perfect. For me at that time, I just, my mentality is just like, I just need to go out there and absorb as much as I could, right? If you don't know things, don't be afraid to ask for help, right? You can go onto LinkedIn, asking people like consultants, seasoned operators, going to events, right? At the first 3 to 5 years, I was going to a lot of these events, like, founders events, like networking events. To be fair, I hate the word networking. It sounds to me very transactional. So I would say relationship
Like
building,
that,
It's creating that ecosystem around you. It's like planting seeds
yeah.
on people's, life in so many ways. Again, how can I help you?
Yeah.
How can we exchange value? how can we create a win-win situation together?
Yeah.
For me, that is entrepreneurship 101.
Love that. And it's great earlier on, you touched on the fact that, a lot of, on social media, they paint this picture of entrepreneurship being, the dreamland and kind of like, raising capital, etc., etc. But like, you highlighted a lot of the, the difficulties of being a founder and kind of like that entrepreneurship journey. And even as an employee, right, when you're really close to, the founder of the company, like you see all of the, the issues that they go through, all the hurdles that they have to overcome, etc. So it's definitely not a linear kind of like path, as kind of like it's painted a lot on social. So you as an employee of a startup, and we always often talk about, to entrepreneurs about taking that journey as well. You've taken that journey. Obviously, you're a founder now, but you've kind of like seen all of those early mistakes and kind of like learned from a lot of that. What was your, path after that kind of like startup, and what did you end up getting involved in after that?
So after that first company, I joined my second company. It's a Swedish brand, a Swedish healthcare company called Kry, Kry. So I was the first few employees in the UK, helped shaping the operation.
Yeah.
At that time, it was just before COVID. Obviously, the NHS was more open-minded when it comes to implementing digital technologies.
Okay.
So that company is a telehealth company. So it's basically virtual consultations, like connecting GPs to patients.
Okay.
So when COVID hit, it was a great idea. It's a great product. So yeah, we managed to get some contracts. But if you talk to any sort of the healthcare, the industry people or companies, working in the healthcare space is notoriously difficult. It's so challenging.
Yeah.
We are not like a dating app. So we have to think about how to make money. Like, where's the distribution? Particularly when it comes to interfacing with the NHS.
Yeah.
It's a dinosaur, there's so many layers of like accountability, bureaucracy, you can talk to your clinicians, they love what you're doing. But after the first few conversations, it's about who's paying for what. And sometimes these conversations can be very difficult and challenging. So yeah, that's why I think in the UK, there's so many companies these days are trying to tap into the health tech space, med tech space. But I think what we need to do a bit more as an industry is to think about the distribution channel, like value-based care. And what is incentives? How can we align that so that we can create a more, lucrative environment? People can take a bit more risk. And when it comes to creating, designing the healthcare system that patients or young people needed.
Understood. Okay. And kind of like, so you worked for that Swedish company, telehealthcare and stuff like that. Obviously, it blew up in COVID, etc., because of the inability to get in person. And then, what was your journey after that, like in terms of your road to Heyr?
So I always joke about this, right? When you want to start a company, you probably need a co-founder. But to find a good co-founder,
it's tough.
It's so tough, right? For me, it's like marriage.
Yeah. Why did you feel like you needed to find a co-founder? And kind of, but even before we got to that stage, like you had identified the problem, right? We talk about identifying a problem statement before you kind of like form, your startup, and that kind of like validates what you're doing and the reason why you've founded a startup. Like, what was the problem statement you had identified, and where did that come from?
So, during COVID, people are more aware of the situation. Young boys, young girls particularly, they come to realize I need to get out of my phone, right? Loneliness is becoming an epidemic, a silence epidemic, right? A lot of young people these days, they are on their phones 12 hours a day. They're not going out there, make friends. They're on Discord, Reddit, all these like online communities. The good thing is they are connected in so many ways. They are taking in a lot of informations, perspectives. They are very creative, in so many ways. But at the same time, I think social anxiety become a very prevalent thing in today's society. Body image, for example, for a lot of young girls these days, they are really struggling, right? I was talking to a doctor the other day, and they were like, you have like young girls coming to me and say they show their phone, it's a Snapchat filter. It's like, I need that face, I need that body. For me, that is insane. It's crazy. It's so toxic. But personally, for me, just going back to where I'm coming from, like just getting people to talk and to understand different experiences, it's so important. So I think I'm pretty good at creating that space for my family, for my friends to show up, and then they can open up. But then I come to realize how many times you go to a pub, you watch an Arsenal game, you've spent 3-4 hours downing like 3-4 pints and shots, and then you go back to your home and be like, was that actually fun? You know, you and your mates, are you guys actually talking? Are you guys having a conversation here? And I just had a similar conversation with a friend of mine. During COVID, we became really good friends. We were doing house parties. We loved a similar kind of music. And there's one day we're like, you know what? Let's do it together.
Okay.
And yeah, that's the start of this journey.
Oh wow! So it's organic in terms of you were having that discussion about having real conversations with friends. You was actually at a party in a kind of like fun, jovial environment, and you came to that point. So that problem state you identified, we all know that there is a problem. But was anything data backed in terms of like, did you get any? Did you search for any data points that kind of like to validate kind of like that problem statement, and that you actually had a viable business as well that you needed to found?
Exactly. So during that time, we want to target young people simply because they are digital natives. I mean, they're AI native these days, it's pretty scary. And I think prevention, it's important, right? To scale prevention is very difficult. From my experience working in different startups, I think there's something systemically wrong in the healthcare system in the UK. We need to shift the mindset, right? You look at Spotify, right? I'm here in the studio. Spotify have done a really good job when it comes to shifting from scarcity to access, right? And I think we can learn from the Spotify model. It's how can we shift healthcare, delivery of health when it comes to young people from sort of the reactive treatment to continuous understanding or monitoring, from sort of hospital based support to community first ecosystem. And that's why we think we need to do something about this, is to create space, whether it's online or offline, and find these people. Everyone knows mental health crisis exist. The problem statement is very simple. We know there's a problem here. We are detecting late when it comes to mental health issues, symptoms, and challenges. But the second most important thing is we are not delivering the care that young people need where they're at. Young people are online and offline. They could be at schools, universities, libraries, gaming studios, festivals, sports clubs, you name it. They're not just in a hospital. So again, we have to think creatively as to how can we find these young people, and early detection needs to start from these communities, over just focusing on this sort of very reactive way of treating young people.
Love that. Thanks for that explanation. That's super clear in my mind. There will be an audience out there that's skeptical about launching an app, a digital first platform to facilitate that mental health issue that you've just kind of like mentioned, or to support that. What speak a bit about Heyr app and kind of like in person, like versus being app based. Like how is that coming to life to support young people, and kind of like think about that counter argument that some people have got in terms of young people going back into an app to help them with their mental health.
Yeah, I mean, we are a digital first company. we set off to transform how young people access mental health care and psycho education. So we frame it as mental fitness, because there's less stigma around the conversation, right? So inside the app, we offer different support. It's AI powered, so it's accessible, it's personalized, and we talk the language of young people, right? Um, Sometimes I question, when it comes to these conversations, why are we focused on the sort of the different conditions? Like we are categorizing mental health care. I'm not a clinician. I'm not a doctor in any shape or forms. Again, but I think that for me, it's a blessing in so many ways. I don't operate, I don't internalize in this sort of dogma of how things are being done in the healthcare system. So for me, that's easier to first from first principle. And of course, the counter argument is like I don't really have that sort of clinical intuition and knowledge, but at the same time, we've been working with a really good team of clinicians, psychologists, and mental health researchers. But to counter what a lot of young people or industry leaders say when it comes to AI, safeguarding and ethics is super important. There's a lot of people say like, "Oh, AI as therapists these days." I even for me sometimes, I ask ChatGPT for dating advice, for emotional support, and it's quite helpful. Um,
Do you not
so
think that, again, we're going to come on to just the point about kind of like meeting the young people where they're at and like the support-based clinician doctors in a sec. Just what you mentioned about ChatGPT and kind of like
yeah,
speaking to LLMs, it's a big topic at the moment in the press, in the media, just generally. That there's a lot of data that's backing up that people are actually speaking to these LLMs on a personal basis, and they're using them as kind of like, companions throughout their day. Essentially, like they're speaking to them for advice. They're kind of like going to them. There's the older demographic as well that are kind of like having full on conversations with ChatGPT, etc. What's your views on that? Because you just mentioned that as someone who's in the mental health space. Like, what's your views on that? And do you not feel like there's a future problem there that people can go down the rabbit hole and speaking to the the LLM 6 hours a day, etc.
yeah. I mean, just to give a little bit more context, right? I always use dentistry
Okay.
as an example of the holy grail, right? Because dentistry, it's regular, it's say annual,
Yeah.
it's preventative, it's fairly low cost compared to a lot of the other procedures and surgeries, and it's convenient, right? So when it comes to a engaging product, a solution, I think these are the four criterias very, very important to think about when it comes to designing your solution, right? It's preventative, so it's worthwhile using it. It's low cost, meaning it's accessible to not just the high net worth people, right? We're talking about accessibility to potentially entire population. It's convenient, which means you can take actions immediately, right? And it's non-invasive as well. So it's ensure safeguarding, it's safe, it can build trust. So, when it comes to an AI solution, I think most of the time it meets some of these criterias, Young people these days, they can check in on the AI therapist.
Yeah.
And
there is actually an AI therapist in the app, is there?
yeah.
Okay.
And they can take actions. It's immediate. They can check in before they go to bed or the first thing they wake up in the morning. So for me, that is sort of the good starting point, I think in the healthcare industry these days, engagement and retention is a big challenge, right? Again, you look at Spotify, it's a great example. Discover Weekly. I love it. Like every morning, Monday, I go to Discover Weekly and see what's out there, right? And that's because it's working for me, yes, sometimes a couple tracks, may not hit the mark, but I would say 80% of the time, it's like, wow, I'm vibing to it. I think when it comes to AI as well, or in the context of healthcare and mental health care, we are collecting a lot of data. Yes, they can be very sensitive, but at the same time, I think it's a good stepping stone as an industry to understand what kind of data is meaningful. How can we make use of these data points and create a story around this so that people, patients, young people can take actions when they needed to, right? You look at wearable technologies like Whoop, they can track your sleeping patterns, your diet, and now there's so many companies are, looking at your voice as well, like, your face, muscle, like how's it change? Like a lot of these metrics are really fascinating. So if we can find a way to manage these data points and create powerful insights, again, we going into early detection and intelligent care. But yeah, sometimes also thinking about, you know, over monitoring as well. Is having more data always a good thing? I don't know. This is something I think as an industry as well, like we need to think deeply about.
Just two things on that. Thanks for the background on that. Just two things that really stand out is that the AI in the Heyr app. What is it learning from? How are you guaranteeing that kind of like it's not kind of like going rogue and hallucinating and providing like crazy responses for your user base? And then secondly, like how are you protecting that user data as well that's being fed into the app?
Yeah, so we are collecting a lot of the mental well-being data in terms of mood, motivations,
Okay.
and we use something called WebWebs, which is a clinically designed mental well-being scale. So we can capture your social well-being. Are you eating healthily? And we can also understand a lot of the stresses that young people are going through. Whether it's eco anxiety, addiction, gambling, the cost of living crisis, loneliness as well. So we can look at young people's mental well-being journey in this very, quantitative way,
Okay.
but also qualitative as well. And for us, it's to again going back to what I said earlier. It's about understanding the young user's journey. And also, if we can zoom out a little bit, these can give us very interesting data point when it comes to the different pockets of space, whether it's online or offline, or universities, sports clubs, and then we can potentially be more targeted to potential like different demographics of young people, and find a way to create space for them.
Yeah.
We have worked with a few football clubs
Okay.
last year,
Nice.
like Chelsea and West Ham.
Yeah.
Which I think is super fascinating. For us, even though we are a digital company, a lot of young people come to us and say, I just need to talk to people,
Yeah.
like real people. I just need to make some friends, right? So we co-created a 6-week program working with Heyr in the Space, which is another very, very great charity. And we co-designed a 6-week program combining football activities, our digital app,
Yeah.
but also very low intensity sort of like CBT sessions. Imagine
What's CBT?
so cognitive behavior therapy.
Okay. Yeah.
Every Thursday, imagine you have 20 Chelsea young friends coming together. We play some football, do some drills. But every Thursday before and after each session, the young people come together and talk. And it's facilitated by a health coach and a football coach. Every week, we touch on different topics. Week 1 could be about how to break bad habits, right? Week 2 about how to build confidence or job searching. Week 3 about gambling, porn addiction, so on and so forth. And for us, we come to realize this is a great way to engage with young people. It's relatable, it's engaging, it's not clinical, so and there's the accountability element into it, right? Can we check in on our friends or family more? It doesn't need to be texting every day or every night. It could be every week, Sunday night, to say, Mom, how are you doing? It sounds so obvious and basics, but at the same time, I think as a society, we're probably not doing the basics right.
Okay. So you just provided a good example to the question I had earlier on in terms of not just being in the digital app space.
Yeah.
So that bringing it to life, Chelsea Football Club, West Ham, etc. These are actually real in-person kind of like events, and you're doing that kind of like outside engagement as well, and probably pairing that, you're leaving the app as an option as a follow-on, right? I presume. Just zooming out again, you're doing all this work. Obviously, you've got app, you've got user. You're trying to reach those young people where they're at and kind of like get them to sign up to the app as a support service. How are you measuring this over time, like the effectiveness of the app, whether things are working or not? Kind of like, what are you seeing in terms of your metrics and data?
I mean, we're still fairly early stage, so we are doing a lot of research, working with our research partners, such as the Imperial and UCL. So I think getting the evidence-based is very, very important. Without that, it's very difficult to interface with any partners, particularly with the NHS. The bar these days are set really high, and so we have to make sure the foundations is clinically saved. We touch on the ethics and data. So for us, that again is our priority for sure. But also, on top of that, when it comes to engaging with young people, it's not just about, doing some post online. It's not just about, collaborating a few content creators. I think it's so much more deeper than that. You look at the fashion industry, for example, what they're very good at is telling the story, right? And the people's taste, their preference, what they desire these days, it's evolving so quickly, right? What's cool means for Gen Z. It's so abstract. It's not just about it's not just about your Spotify playlist anymore, right? It's about the aesthetics. And for me, again, I'm not a content creator. I didn't study digital marketing. I came from a very sort of like scientific background. One thing I've come to realize is, particularly in the healthcare space, is the fact that we underappreciate the importance of branding. It's almost like it's a dirty word, right? And it's not something commercial at all. For us as a company, as a brand, we spend a lot of time just embedding ourselves into the communities, like talking to young people, like listen to them and figuring out what are their sort of digital habits, what are the hashtags, who are the sort of up and coming artists, where are the space, Apartment Life, I think it's a great example.
We all love Apartment Life. We've got our beige and kind of like white clothing on, right? Yeah.
For us, it's about the identity, right? Yeah. Again, I think we can learn so much from the fashion industry or from the sort of like content creator space. Even Mr. Beast, I'm a big fan of Mr. Beast because he knows the importance to be different, right? If you want to challenge the bigger players in the industry, you can't be the same. You have to really think outside the box. Sometimes you can get some sort of, stares and people are like, what are you doing? But at the same time, when you're small players, I think being imperfect is a blessing. Yeah. Taking risk, it's probably something we should be more comfortable about as an industry.
I love those points that you just raised there, and kind of you mentioned it. You hit the nail on the head in terms of like the healthcare industry. It does need to innovate. It does need to position itself. It does need to brand a lot of these kind of like services so that it is connected to, you know, this younger demo that aren't necessarily in kind of like, you know, the kind of like spaces that the NHS kind of like appeals to currently right now. So I think that's like super crucial and key. Like you've mentioned that, and Heyr, you can just see it in terms of like the way it's all branded and kind of like it's very much approachable. What's the future for yourself as a founder and Heyr?
First and foremost, I think it's cultural sensing.
Okay.
You know, as I touched on earlier, it's an evolving space. So I think being experimentation, whether it's the product, the pitch deck, how we communicate, how we think about, engaging with young people, I think these are very important conversations, right? So cultural sensing, how do we show up for young people, working with them? And second, it's about how can we scale, right? Now we have a very decent product. You know, young people are using it, they're engaging with it. The next phase, it's about scaling, right?
Yep.
Where are the touch points? Where are the distribution channels, right?
Sure.
Whether it's schools, colleges, universities, Chelsea, gyms, workplace, and the NHS. So right now, it's about understanding where the touch points are, who is paying for what, and hopefully we can create some meaningful kind of like impact to these communities. And third, again, it's about scaling, but for me, it's like my personal upscaling as well, right? As a founder, I think it's very easy to just keep going, keep chasing, for the next milestone. And these days, I've been thinking a lot around just being more in the present, and scaling down or slowing down, It's really about taking time and think about what does it mean to be a founder? Like, why are you doing this? And it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. So I think every day you have to be very intentional about like aligning your identity, your value to your company. It's like your baby, isn't it?
Brilliant.
And these things can be very scary, right? Like you're putting yourself out there, you're exposing yourself every day, and it's about showing up, in different environment. Whether it's in investors meeting or showing up for your team. These things for me is also very important.
Some key points there for future founders and entrepreneurs in terms of identity and values. I love that you've mentioned those, and staying core and kind of like true to yourself and knowing your own identity as well is obviously like really, really important. You just mentioned scaling the business, obviously not just kind of like scaling kind of like your own time and kind of like scaling down. Have you bootstrapped up until now, and are you going to be raising in the future?
Yeah, we raised our pre-seed round
you've done your pre-seed?
a couple of years ago. But yeah, next year our focus would be also around making sure the evidence-based, it's solid, and we can start raising again our seed round sometime next year.
Okay, so
Very
we'll look out for like your future and kind of like reaching a wider and broader audience. What call to actions have you got for the audience that are kind of like watching this now? Obviously, we're going to be tagging this as kind of like mental health and kind of like, we might get, some people that are kind of like inquisitive about what you're doing, your app. Like, where can they go to find out more about yourself, as well as kind of like signing up for the app?
Well, check us out. It's Heyr app. We are on social media, Instagram. Check out our website. You can find me everywhere. Kevin Kwong, Kwong. It's my name. But yeah, I mean, I would love to find different ways to work with, different people, whether you are a fashion designer, content creator, festival founders, sports, football players. I am very open to have a conversation. For us, it's about innovating, as the mindset, right? We know there's so much more we can learn from you guys. So yeah, let's have some conversations.
Incredible, Kevin. We thank you for coming on the Future Included podcast. and we look forward to hearing a lot more about yourself and your founder journey. And we'll be jumping into Heyr. So everyone go and download Heyr, and we'll include a link in the description. Thanks a lot, Kevin.
Sounds good. Thanks, Richard. Thanks for having me.